Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, as well as the latest episode of Black Lightning. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I could have time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of The Flash, you can skip to what I have to say about this week's episode of Black Lightning. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Flash. So let's break down a lot of things that went down this episode. Finally, we learned a little bit more about Cicada in many different regards. But first off, let's talk about the fact is he's a notorious villain for The Flash because he was not the only one, but at least he's well known for the fact is that he was one that the Flash never caught. No one ever caught him, whether it be Supergirl, the Legends, the Legion, like whoever went up against him, no one caught. Because she even talks about the fact is that the Green Arrow, obviously note that she never did say Oliver. Like, I think that's kind of an interesting detail to also point out. But yeah, no one was able to catch Cicada, so no one really knew too much about him or his identity and stuff like that. So, but this all seems to be a byproduct of Nora coming back in this time. So a villain that usually doesn't pop up until later has now popped up sooner. And there's the whole situation of like, there's the aspect of the victims are different too. So Nora starts feeling that pressure, which Barry, he even kind of talks to her about it later on, but it's like, we can make direct comparisons to the whole Flashpoint situation because of what he did about Flashpoint that created a whole Savitar situation. So there's direct comparisons in that regard. But Nora kind of feels that pressure because she blames herself because it's like, because I came back in time and changed things, that led to things playing out the way they are. Like, he's a serial killer, which this is the first time they've ever really gone. They've gone up against metas who've killed people before, but this is like the first time they've gone up against like a serial killer, which is something I didn't even really think about at the time. But that adds a very interesting element to this season in that regard. But they bring in Sherlock Wells. He's a Wells from a different point in time. I love that they bring in Wells first, and then Cisco's like, this dude's an asshole, essentially. And then he's super nice. He's like, he's like, oh, Flash. Like, oh, Nora. Oh, Iris. And just kind of giving them compliments and stuff. And they're like, man, I don't know what you were talking about, Cisco. He's super cool. He's like, you know what? Never mind. Just forget it. But then he suggested this Wells, who is obviously very reminiscent of Sherlock Holmes, but he's a very great detective. I wonder, how does he compare against Batman? Because, in the DC comics, Batman's typically considered the world's greatest detective. So I'm wondering, typically, like, how he would stack against Batman. Who knows? But interestingly enough, I love what his story ends up being, because it's like, oh, we got to pay you. Really? You're not just going to help us for free? Oh, okay, whatever. It seems that he is pretty good at what he does because he immediately deduces a lot of interesting things about everybody. And he ends up quickly deducing, I know exactly who Cicada is. And it is David Hirsch. They track the dude down. Turns out it's not the dude because Nora's changing the timeline affected a lot of things. In fact, it made it so that Cicada not only showed up sooner and the victims are different, he's actually a completely different person. And that plays into Sherlock Wells' story that I thought was kind of interesting, because for him, it's like, he's almost like HR, because HR came to this earth trying to pretend like he was smarter than he was. So did this Sherlock, but truth be told, he is the great detective that he is. It's just he cut corners because like he's done this like 36 other times. And so it's like, oh yeah, on this earth, it was David Hirsch. He figured it out the first time, but then he figured it out again and again. And it's kind of a set pattern of like, okay, no matter what, all the evidence leads to it being David Hirsch. So I'm putting on a little spectacle for the money and stuff like that. But hey, bam, it's always this guy. But because Nora changed things, it altered a lot. That is kind of crazy to think of just the ripple effects are that far that literally a serial killer villain is literally a different person. So I'm guessing whatever it is that makes Cicada ended up affecting a different person instead. So I'm guessing that's what it is. Like normally it'd be Hirsch, because David Hirsch in this is kind of like an anti-government person who does a lot of bombings and hurts people, which he does. But I'm thinking he doesn't get the whole superpowers and probably doesn't get in his head to go after metahumans specifically. Why don't I'm trying to figure out, like, does he specifically go after metahumans or not? And I don't remember the first person like Nora brought up whether he was. I don't think she specified whether he was a metahuman or not. So I think it's a situation of Cicada killed people, but now it's like because who Cicada is in this timeline on this Earth, it makes it so that Cicada is going after metahumans specifically. Because Nora never brought up the fact is that person was a metahuman. So, I mean, could have just, it feel like it would have been in the detail they would have brought up, but, you know, that's why I'm thinking, like, oh, he was just a regular serial killer at that point in time, but now it's, like, more specifically, he's aiming for metahumans because it's a different person who has different motives behind it. So I'm thinking it's a situation of something in the timeline shifted enough for the power that would make that person Cicada went to someone else. Cause what we notice about Cicada is Cicada has this, like, slash mark on his real name is Orlin, but he has a slash mark on his chest, and it seems like it's glowing the same color as the power and stuff like that. And it also seems like it's slowly killing him. So maybe that's also another reason why Cicada was never caught, was because Cicada eventually died. Like maybe the power is so much that it burns him out. Because it almost seemed like Cicada does seem like fairly superhumanly strong. Because part of me was wondering, is that just because you're taking away a lot of these meta's powers? But I think it's also because it gives him enhanced strength. He can probably take a couple like punches and stuff like that. So probably has like I said, just adorable body at this point in time, but eventually everything is going to take its toll because even the wound, because even the person later on is like, it's not healing, which is so interesting that that person knows about what he's doing potentially, or at least knows some semblance of his situation. I mean, I doubt the papers have really come out and talked about Cicada like that, so it's probably like not well spread news. But she knows to some extent what's going on with him because knowing that things aren't getting better with Orlin's condition, so there's that. Because clearly we don't have a full defined look at what Cicada is capable of doing. It's hard to say like whether the dagger thing is connect. Like does Cicada already have his own powers and then the dagger thing is a bonus or what? Because it also seems like Cicada can fly because at one point it seems like Cicada just kind of flies away, kind of jumps up and away. But at one point it's like it can use the dagger he can make a shield out with the dagger. So it's like it must do something with energy because the dagger can release energy too because he was using it to kind of torture Joe. So there's some energy mixed in with that, like not unless it's like some life force energy, like this power uses your own life force as the power. So maybe with it you can generate a lot of stuff. Plus you do have the durable body potential. Like I said, I don't know. We'll probably get a lot more like in-depth understanding about it, but the crazy thing about this episode was because Nora was so adamant about trying to fix her mistake. She wanted Hirsch to be Cicada so badly because it's like, okay, that way I'm so close to fixing what I messed up. Just because so much is happening, so much is changing. Like literally this super villain is here earlier and things are going down differently than they were supposed to because she changed things. So Barry kind of had to talk to her to kind of finally slow down and think things through. Was that like, I attributed it to that, to her using flash time at that point in time. Maybe that wasn't her using flash time. I thought of it was, but when she everything kind of extremely slowed down and she was thinking, it didn't seem like just a regular speedster moment. It seemed like that might have been her using flash time. Potentially. Maybe that was just her just moving super fast and just thinking so fast that it just kind of slowed everything down. I like to think it was flash time because I just think that'd be kind of neat that she's kind of slowly heading in that direction of Barry to do what she can do. I mean, like I said, she's talked about it a little bit of what she's capable of doing, that she can like go back in time a few seconds, but I doubt that's what she was doing. It was just simply like slowing time down at that point. So that's interesting. Luckily, they were able to fake Cisco's death because that was about to get ugly. Because I titled this episode "The Death of Vibe." That's why I was curious, like what that could have implied. Because my initial thought was what I was thinking last episode, because he got his hand cut, that his powers wouldn't work. Because they kind of cut back to it in this episode, but not unless his hands got cut again, you see like the gloves are kind of a little messed up. So it's like, is the power just not coming out because of the dampening from the blade, or is it because his hand got cut? Like I said, there might be shards of it inside, but it's probably not the blade itself. It's probably a combination of the blade, or rather like his power. Like, you know, he's the one that's generating the power that's sucking stuff away from the, everything nearby. I don't know. Like it's hard to say what's his abilities and what's coming from the dagger, you know? So luckily they faked an explosion. Well, they used the explosion as a way to disguise like, oh yeah, he's okay. because they literally, the same thing happened with Sherlock Wells early in the episode, faking his own death. Because apparently all the money he owes them is gone because he used it to immediately pay his 7 wives, because he has 7 ex-wives, because he has a lot of alimony to pay, which is interesting because it's like, yeah, he paid that all off in one day. He even talks about using that trick on his 4th and 6th wife, and it worked. And he's like, it turns out it's the same woman. That's an interesting story all on its own. You always get an interesting person when it comes to these whales. I was actually kind of shocked because I wasn't sure if we'd actually get a whales this season or not. But for him to be a detective and everything, it's like, okay, because I really appreciate that, because it's like each time it's like a different whales. I mean, obviously Harry came back last season, but Harry's situation was a little different, especially where he ends up. So probably won't be seeing him too much unless he like builds back up all the knowledge that he had before after the whole thing with his brain. So we'll ultimately see in the end what ends up going on with all of that. But what I think is the most interesting thing is that he makes the deduction that, Nora, you doing you've done all this kind of coming back here to this point in time, but the fact of the matter is the whole satellite thing, that wasn't just your decision, right? And he's joking. He's like, oh, no, obviously it was just yours. And then immediately my brain goes, wait, so Nora, like everything that's happening now isn't just Nora's decision. Nora probably didn't know, or, like I said, she probably doesn't really have much of a teacher when it comes to this whole thing. I mean, it depends on how much of the stuff is omitted from like the Flash Museum, because a lot of his screw ups and stuff are probably removed. So like the whole creating an alternate timeline and stuff like that, Flashpoint and just all the screw ups that Barry's kind of had over the years probably might be omitted, because it's like, yeah, you want to make your hero seem as amazing as possible. It also depends on who's the one creating that, trying to leave out a lot of the details. So now it goes, okay, so who advised her to do this? Is it someone from the future and like someone like a mentor type of state? Immediately my brain goes, Iris. Iris pushed you to do this, didn't she? Because she felt like this was the best way to make sure you can get Barry back. Like, I think Nora's hidden her motives. Like, obviously she hid her motives of like why she's really here, because she's trying to figure out a way to undo everything about Barry. But she didn't realize like the time would kind of flip the way it did and just kind of completely change things the way they are. But I think that might play into, like, it might be like what I brought up before. Like Iris, like I brought up different suggestions about like why her and Iris don't get along in the future. It's like maybe Iris became so obsessed with trying to find Barry, and now Nora is kind of caught in the middle of that. Maybe that's why she's a little weird about seeing her mom, because she knows who her mom is in the future and how like messed up her mom can be about all of this. So her mom probably pushed her to do this. It's like, no, this is it. Do this. This is the right thing for our family. Because maybe in Nora's mind, it's like, if I do this, not only am I getting my dad back, maybe mom will be better and okay now, that might be a thought process on its own. I mean, like I said, it just seemed like Nora knows there's definitely some stuff, there's some history there with her and her dad. I mean, her and her mom. So that begs the question, like, what exactly? That's kind of a big mystery. So that was just kind of an interesting thing. And Sherlock Wells being the way he is, it's like, oh, he's not done with that deduction. Like, he's still figuring that out. And that's probably something we're going to see kind of happen in the background. But I think that's so fascinating. I'm so curious to see if it ends up being an Irish thing or if it ends up being something else entirely. The information of Cicada potentially being a father, because of all the stuff that he said about to Joe of like, oh yeah, like I hate to do this to a family man. Also interesting enough, he doesn't know the secret identity of a lot of people, which, I mean, why would he? But the thing is, like, he didn't know where to get to Vibe directly, so he went to Joe because he figured Joe must have a connection. He shows Joe a picture of Iris and Barry, not realizing that Barry's the Flash. So it's not like he's all knowing in this situation. It's just he's trying to find a way to eradicate all metahumans, which once again we don't know why, but it must have something to do with his daughter. But the way he was holding a blanket and stuff like that, I'd already talked about that before, because of the way he acted when Nora was like, Dad, it made him hesitate, because it made him go, holy crap, this metahuman I'm about to kill is a father. That's why he was reluctant to torture Joe, because he just wanted to kill Vi. Because also Joe's a regular dude. That's why he didn't really do anything else, because he has no quorums with regular people. He kind of has a problem with Barry, because it doesn't matter if you're a good metahuman or not. All metahumans are kind of bad in his mind, because for him it's also Barry had the Flash had the chance to not just stop all these metahumans, but put an end to them. So there's that. What exactly happened to his daughter, we don't know, but it seems like her condition is what seems to be his main motivation. So, along with all of that, we have Caitlin and Ralph. I really like the whole Ralph saving the day situation, and he kind of gets mocked a little bit. Also, that thief. Has that guy come up before? He's been in a little kind of like local thug, or before. I feel like he has, hasn't he? I also like the fact of the matter is he's very particular about stuff. He's like, yeah, I've been like charging this special gun I've got. Also, the lady's about to put on the money. He's like, no, 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 no. I told you, I brought my own bag. She's like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, apology accepted. And it's just like, okay, this dude's weird. But the way everyone's kind of laughing at Ralph, and he's like, you guys are focusing on the wrong things. I know what I look like right now. Don't you dare post that. It's like, come on, guys. I just saved you and you're laughing. That's not cool. So he wants to feel a little better about himself. So he decides, he's helping out Caitlin. They confront her mom. Her mom lies about everything, very clearly lies because they know more than they let her on to know. And so they end up finding a note from Caitlin's dad. It was like a suicide note, but then it turns out later on when she kind of reads the code of the little game that they used to make where she kind of make up elements, it comes out to be a message saying, Caitlin, come find me, meaning her dad isn't dead. But we see that someone is watching her. So my mind immediately goes to, why would her mom lie about this? Because her mom doesn't want Caitlin anywhere near her dad. Because her dad is probably, once again, the reason why she is the way she is. Because he experimented on her without anybody's permission. And, Caitlin has a fond memory of her dad. And her mom probably doesn't want to. Well, it's actually kind of interesting. Just kind of a little side note. It's kind of that joke that people make about Batman v Superman of like, oh yeah, Martha Wayne and Martha Clark. It's just kind of funny because it's like, what's her dad's name? Thomas. And it's like, yeah, what's Batman's dad's name? Thomas. I don't know. Just me being stupid. I do apologize. But it's just something I couldn't help but think about right now. But it might be a situation of like, your dad's a terrible person. I'd rather not ruin your memory of it. I'd rather not tell you the truth. Because I mean, obviously she had to become like a metahuman with the whole Killer Frost thing, some shape or form. So maybe that's what he does. He experiments on people. People are his experiments, and it shows that his daughter was no different. Maybe he did it to save her life, but it still didn't change. Maybe he started off with the best of intentions, but then he got like, no, ooh, this and that, and just kind of went further and further down a dark path. Maybe that's not him watching. Maybe that's someone else, but I'm assuming that's him watching. So it makes you wonder, at how long has he had an eye on Caitlin? Has it been ever since she came back last season? Has he always had an eye on her? That's the big question. Not unless that's secretly something connected to her mom, like her mom might have cameras and stuff like. Because the last time we saw her within the show talk to her mom was back in season 3 when she was trying to get rid of her abilities. That's the only thing. Interestingly enough, that must mean that her mom must have realized what was going on back then too. Obviously, like TV show wise, probably not, but like, you could think continuity wise, it's like, oh yeah, she had to have some idea of what that was all about and didn't let Caitlin know even then. So, because this runs even deeper than just like the particle accelerator. Because whatever was there, it was always there. It just happened to take till now to come to the surface. So once again, we don't know if that's 100% true in the original timeline, or is this just like a Flashpoint situation of like creating this alternate timeline. Like, season 1 and 2 timeline, did that same thing apply to Caitlin or not? We'll never know. So there's a lot to kind of break down about this episode. So I'm so curious to see where all that takes us going forward in the next episode, and whether or not what I was thinking about Cisco not being able to have his powers anymore, whether that ends up becoming a thing or not. It seems like that's not the case. It seems like, if there were any chips inside of, like any pieces of the blade inside his hand, it seems like it had to be a combination of Cicada and it to work. So it's just the fact of the matter, Cicada thinks he's dead, so Cisco is going to have to be on the low now, or Cicada is going to come after him again. So there's that. So like I said, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Black Lightning. So let's break this episode down. Some interesting things went down. First of all, we see that Lynn now has a partner when it comes to this whole working with the kids situation. It's a doctor named Jace, but it turns out she was in prison for doing a lot of illegal experiments on people, which led 11 people without their feet. But then it turns out it's like, nope, it was 10 people without their feet. One of them actually died. And she says it so casually, which kind of shows you she's not the most stable person, especially later on when, like, cause she's got that implant in her, leg, her ankle that makes it so that if like, she kind of steps out of line, like she kind of gets taken down. And it's like, oh, and if you try to take it out, an alarm will go off and they will shoot you. And so basically Lynn is kind of like, do note that if you do anything that I feel like will hurt me, hurt anyone here or these kids, I will send you, make sure you go to the deepest, darkest place. And her only response to all that is like, I guess, cause Lynn's like, do you understand? She's like, I understand. And then she's like, I guess we're not going to be friends. And it's just like her demeanor and everything. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's exactly why Lynn didn't want to work with her, but Odell's kind of like, hey, this is who you're going to work with. She's the one who's very good in this field and stuff like that. It's like, oh, but what about her being a psychopath? Let's ignore that. It's like, okay, sure, we'll completely and utterly ignore that. For now, at the very least, that's probably going to turn ugly in some shape or form. How exactly? I don't know, but just the lady doesn't seem stable. I'm just interested to see where that goes in that regard. Some other things that went down this episode is Jennifer got introduced to Perina, who, interesting enough, I don't know the actress's name, but obviously, like, the most recent thing I saw her in was Beyond, the Freeform TV show. I think one of her character's name, Tess. That's the most recent thing. But also, like, Living Single, which I think I randomly came across this, like, I think I was flipping something that he was talking about it. But Cress Williams, the actor who plays Jeff / Black Lightning, I think he was in Living Single. I think that's what it was saying. I think it might have been something else. I don't know. Like, I feel like that was what I was read, but I could be 100% wrong. Besides, it's been a very long time since I've seen that show. I've caught glimpses of it recently just because my sister has been watching it, but like, I have not seen that show in a long enough time to know, like, if he was a regular in it later on in the show or, like, what the whole deal is. So if that is, that'd be kind of an interesting connection. Even if it's not the case, you know, still that actress from that show, because that's like that and Beyond are the only things I really know her from. I think I've seen her in other things, but those are definitely the two that, like, first come to mind. So it seems like Perina has the ability to basically kind of like, she's on some Inception level stuff when it comes to her abilities. Once again, we're just kind of throwing it out. I don't know whether she's someone that's kind of like a meta who's kind of working with the ASA, hence how Gamby knows her. Is she someone outside of this whole Freeland situation is what I'm curious about. Once again, like I said, they're throwing it out there like metahumans are an established thing, but they don't really bring it up too much outside of Freeland. Freeland's the main focus, so the outside world of Freeland kind of doesn't really get talked about in that regard. At least I feel like, so that's why I'm still, even at this point in time, still kind of confused on where they stand with all of that. I guess at this point it's just kind of just to be assumed, like, because you already know what metahumans are because of the Flash and everything, just know that they already exist in this world and just kind of think of it like that. That's how I've kind of always done it, but I felt like this world's kind of setting up its own thing, so I just, it's nevertheless. So it's just kind of interesting that Gamby knows her. He's actually the one who suggested her, but basically she can create this mental world. So she's trying to create she's kind of representing like a therapist for Jennifer, giving her someone to talk to while also giving her a place to train with her abilities without it really drawing too much attention, because it's kind of like I said, Inception level stuff that she can build realities and worlds inside of minds. She makes it like a salon, which I thought was kind of interesting, like her perspective on it of like, oh yeah, this is a place where black women can get together, they can talk, and, you know, just, I don't know, I just love like how she spun it, you know, it's just kind of a place for women, you know, to take their power back, in the sense of like, so much history is connected to that world, you know, so I thought that was just kind of interesting. She just wanted to make Jennifer feel at ease. But Jennifer isn't only about putting her feelings in a box, it's also about confronting them. And when we see is Jennifer kind of burning and she's screaming. So I'm guessing like it's feelings of just like the turmoil she's in, the sense of like everything's spiraling. Like maybe it's manifesting itself as like her abilities kind of suffocating her or burning her life away. Maybe that could be what the significance of that is, or that could just legit. I mean, it doesn't seem like her ability burns her in that regard, but maybe that's just, I don't know. I feel like that's more probably like a like representation of something, not like it being literal. But then at the same time, there's part of you wonder, like, Perina seems like she's on the up and up, but you're a little suspicious of everything. So I don't know. We'll see. Because in the long run, it's kind of sad because like Jennifer felt like she was being blindsided by this because her parents didn't really let her know ahead of time. But it's something Lyndon already talked about. Like you need someone to talk to about this situation to kind of help you get your powers under control and everything. But it's like this lady, you're just walking, she knows your name, and then she kind of just jumps into your mind and stuff like that. Of course, you'd be a little freaked out. But then Jennifer's like, oh yeah, because you think I'm a monster witch, Jeff is like, no, I don't. The fact of the matter is, it's all my fault. Like, because for him, it's like, you going all through this is because of me. Like, it's not like Jeff asked to be a metahuman himself, but the fact of the matter, it just never crossed his mind because that situation doesn't really come up, but he never thought like, hey, me being a metahuman means my kids are like, they never showed any ability, so he never thought much of it, So it's like, it's my fault because if I had probably told you sooner about your abilities before they manifested themselves, then maybe we wouldn't be in this situation right now. I guess it's another side of things. So, because for him, it's like, if I could take it all back, I could. When it comes to Black Lightning, there's, Jeff in general, there are two interesting stories. Obviously, we get a little introduction to the new principal, Lowry. I recognize that actor. I just can't place what the last thing I've seen. But he's one of those actors you see from time to time. It turns out Principal Lowry's kind of a dick. Because at first it's like, for one, he doesn't even show, like, Jefferson, like, the proper respect. Because he's like, who are you when you walk in those offices? Oh, I'm Jefferson. Right. Pierce, right. I'm the guy that, he doesn't say it, but it's kind of like, right, you're the guy I'm taking the job from. But it's just, for him, he snaps. Because he's like, Mr. Lowry, Principal Lowry, and it's kind of like, you're adults. He's not a child here. I feel like I don't know. Maybe I don't know. It seemed like he's already immediately like, yeah, you power tripping. I can already feel it a little bit. But putting in metal detectors and stuff, and it's like, no, do we really need that? And he's like, yes. If we didn't, it's like, yes. Or you'd still have your job. It's like, you don't have to say stuff like that. You don't have to be a dick. He's like, oh, the little meeting you have with the students. He's like, I want to make sure this transition works. But he's like, well, isn't that fantastic? Well, good. Like, it's just, you can't, he's resonating douchebag, and it's just kind of like, okay, so that's definitely going to turn very sour soon. We'll just still have to wait to see how it will, but it's just kind of like, not a great introduction to the dude. He seems kind of like a dick, but maybe just for him, it's like, he's trying to do things his way. It's like, I'm going to run this school to be productive. This is the job I was given. I'm going to do it. I'm not trying to be everybody's friend, because Jeff got to know a lot of people. Like, he built a connection, a community with this community. And so for him, he knows everybody. He knows their stories. Lowry's not going to do the same thing for him. It's just kind of like, no, I'm going to do what I'm obligated to do. I'm going to do my job and not, because for him, it might feel like, oh, you go above and beyond. Sure, you went above and beyond until it really counted. So I'll protect these kids where you failed. That type of thing. So. And then another side of things is a whole thing with Henderson, which was kind of interesting because Henderson ended up finding out about, Jeff kind of getting fired as principal, but also he goes to Jeff not as for Jeff's help, but for Black Lightning's help with the whole figuring out who killed Summers and the whole why his car was on fire. Which Henderson, being the good cop he is, it's kind of like, yeah, immediately it's like, yeah, Summers was up to some super shady stuff. But the fact is things are still awkward between him and Henderson because even though he's like, well, you want Black Lightning's help? Jeff is like, wait, are you okay with this whole vigilante thing right now? Which is he has very complex feelings about it. And Jeff is like, we need to talk about this. And he's like, yeah, at some point. So, obviously Henderson, because, they have such a long-standing friendship, and it's now you find out that this superhero you were pretty tight with is your best friend that you're super tight with too. So it's being betrayed on multiple fronts, because it's yeah, he didn't always support the whole Black Lightning thing, but he understood what Black Lightning stood for. But it's just the fact is that you're his best friend, and he's the last one to know about who you are. So it's kind of a little bit of a dagger, kind of getting twisted in a little harder. So I'm interested to see where all that kind of goes. I'm going to be skipping around here, but obviously at the end they arrest Tobias. I'm assuming because the name on the casket was well. I'm like, okay, so he must have went to his sister's tomb. I'm assuming. Um, because the question did because even something Jeff asked later on, why did Tobias do what he's doing? Like he's kind of out in the open, like doing what he did is just exposing himself, but for what purpose? He literally spent so much time. That was even the thing in season 1. Like Jeff needed to make it so that Tobias could come out into the light of like, oh, prove that he was alive after all this time. Or at the very least, he was still around and kicking and operating because he's kept quiet for these past 30 years. My thought process last episode, and I think this episode kind of leans me towards that direction, is he's cleaning house to do everything he needs to. He's getting rid of all the evidence. But the question is, once again, why now of all times? Once again, I guess it's because he's got all this power. Whatever's in that suitcase of Proctor's has kind of made him be like, okay, it's time for the end game. And once I pull this trigger, there's no going back. So he can't let anything step in his way. So I don't know in what shape or form it's necessarily going to move in that direction, but still, the fact because something came up this episode where Jeff was trying to get evidence that Tobias exists in the sense of like, oh yeah, but none of the security cameras caught him or cyanide. So that makes me go, okay, so is Tobias trying to burn all the records connected to himself? Because how can you charge someone with the murder of Alvin Pierce when that person doesn't exist? Probably all his files and stuff were like that were connected. That's why he killed his right-hand man last episode, because he needs to kill anyone that has any connection between him and this whole Alvin thing. So him getting arrested at the end of the episode makes you go, yeah, but he's probably going to immediately get freed because all the evidence that was connected to it, all the stuff that Khalil was burning those newspapers were probably the ones that were out of Alvin's mouth. So none of the evidence exists anymore. He made sure to clean house in that regard. So, but why? Like I said, I guess just because that's the one murder he handled directly. This is what I said last episode, and I'm guessing it still kind of pertains. It still seems feasible at this point in time, is that was the one thing he handled himself. So I don't know. We'll see in the long run whether that ends up being the case or not. Another side of things that I thought was kind of an interesting thing was like Jennifer kind of gave Anissa dating advice in regards of like, oh yeah, you with Zoe B, but it's like, oh, you shouldn't be with her. She's like cotton candy. You need soul food. Essentially, it's like you need a relationship that really means something. And yeah, because it does seem like that Zoe thing is kind of like a fling. I mean, granted, we'll see whether or not anything else happens from that, because it does seem like she's hitting it off with Grace. I thought was kind of interesting because even Grace admits like, oh yeah, I was seeing other people. But then part of me is like, oh, is she saying that just to kind of like make Anissa, like not to make things weird? Or she kind of go like, yeah, I'll kind of act a little jealous and stuff like that, even though I was seeing other people. Because it's like they never established a relationship. But Anissa's kind of like, yeah, my job is very important to me, but I want to take that seriousness into relationships as well, because I want to try and make this kind of something more. So we'll see, because I kind of felt like, like I said, like the first time, like there was a like spark between Anissa and Grace in the first place, like last season, but just nothing ever really came about it because she kind of stepped up being Thunder and stuff like that. So like I said, we'll see if anything else comes about this Zoe B situation. Maybe not. Maybe that just kind of pushed it away side, but I kind of feel like that might not be the case. Might kind of get ugly in that regard, but like I said, we'll see in the long run. What I thought was also interesting is the fact is Gamby was willing to help her collect the money like she was going to for the clinic, because obviously there's like a lot of development that's happening, but it turns out that's probably like a money laundering scheme. So that's the whole thing. Because even Gamby's like, okay, I'm not going to tell your dad, but he's like, I am going to tell you when it's something stupid, so, but he backs her up in this situation. So I thought that was kind of pretty interesting. Collected the money, gave it to the pastor. I'm curious to see, because that was something I was curious about, like, because I thought eventually, and maybe it will happen, but I thought eventually, like, she'd cross paths with Khalil / Tobias unknowingly. I thought, like, I mean, who's to say all that's still not connected anyway, but still. I just thought that was kind of interesting. because I thought that's the direction it was going to go. But it's like, no, she got the money. So it's like, hey, maybe things will work out. Because part of me keeps feeling like, yeah, things are probably going to fall a little bit apart in that regard, just in some shape or form. Like things aren't going to go her way forever. Everything's been good so far, but we'll see how long that continues. We see Gambi get an uninvited guest, and that's Kara. I guess because it seems like she's got her wound bandaged up. It's hard to say whether she's dead or not. It looks like she was still possibly breathing because it looked like Gambi checked her wound too. So it looked like she either got help from someone else, which I highly doubt it. It was most likely she probably took care of it herself. But I guess she's been trying to avoid going. I think the right reason why it took so long for her to get to Gambi, probably had to track down his actual place, but also probably trying to make sure she stays off Tobias's radar before he tracks her down and finishes the job. So that's definitely going to be interesting, especially with the whole Black Lightning situation. I'm curious to see what happens with that, because I'm curious would Jeff end up explaining things to her. Will it be like, oh yeah, remember Black Lightning when you're trying to turn him in and everything? Oh yeah, it turns out, oh, you were working with Proctor and all that. You were a spotter and all that. Like, well, I don't know. I doubt they'd want. It's hard to say, because he probably will come as Black Lightning, but he probably won't come as himself. Maybe it'll come out that way, because if it comes out that he's Jeff, there's going to be the whole situation in his family, but maybe he wants her to know the truth, because it's like, you put my entire family in danger doing what you're doing. I don't know. Maybe we'd also learn a little bit more about her this season, about how she got to where she was with the ASA, but we'll see. Jeff has this whole conversation with Khalil, which Khalil has more and more hesitation with this whole Tobias thing. I mean, at this point in time, he feels like he's in too deep, so he has no choice. That whole thing, like when he did the whole Rion situation, for one, shutting that Ramel dude up, being like, first of all, I ain't nobody's bitch. Two, the name is Painkiller, because the dude's going off about like, oh, look at you, I remember you back when you were in a wheelchair, and then before that you were running track, you up here trying to act like you were a gangster, to kind of set him straight. Sadly, Rion ended up dying. Surprisingly enough, Tobias didn't say anything about that. Either Tobias didn't hear about it, which I felt like, no, Tobias would hear about that. Once again, Lala gets brought up, but like we haven't seen hide nor hair of him for a while, so I'm curious to see like what's going to happen with that situation. So that was what it was, so that's kind of interesting. But it's also interesting because of the whole little bitch comment, because he kind of is like Tobias's bitch to a certain extent, because it's like Tobias kind of barks out the orders and Khalil kind of has to go, because it's like, if I don't, he'll probably kill me. He's already pissed at me about the whole cyanide thing. He's kind of still pissed, but hey, it's like barking orders to me, but still, it's better than him killing me. But I just thought it was kind of interesting, because even Jeff called him and he was like, you little bitch, because he was getting so pissed. Because Jeff gets very frustrated when it comes to Tobias, so he kind of doesn't listen. He just kind of loses himself in his rage, because he's trying to talk to Khalil, because he talked to Khalil's mom, and he's trying to talk to Khalil into like backing away. He's like, let me find Tobias, I can put it into it. He's like, dude, you almost died from Tobias fighting you last time. It's not like you're going to fare much well against him either. The only person I feel like that's really going to reach Khalil is Jennifer. She's the one that pulls at his humanity the most. It makes you wonder like what's going to happen with his whole her whole situation, like if she ever lets it slip about her powers, because like the last thing you want is him of all people to know the truth about their family situation, because he can end up telling Tobias, because he could have one of his moments of slipping and going back to being a bad guy, to being Painkiller. But for now it seems like that Khalil side of him is kind of it's surfacing a lot more, but we do still see Painkiller. So I'm curious to see in the long run what ends up happening, because Gambi will be able to make some a cure for his darts and stuff like that, because Jeff caught one. So, and we saw it a little bit this episode, but obviously the continuation of the green light epidemic, because that's that girl at the beginning who was trying to get home, which we still never found out what that was all about, like why she was in a rush to get back home and stuff like that. I'm curious to see where the cops really stand, because I thought that might kind of come up in some shape or form about like the cops who kind of, obviously, because even the cops are trying to handle it with care too, because they have like tasers. They're like, please don't make us do this. And he's like, okay, you want to go home? He's like, one of the cops was like, I want to go home too. So I'm sure there was a part of them was just kind of appreciative that Black Lightning stepped in, but a part of me was kind of almost halfway expecting like the whole cops versus vigilante thing, which is turning into a whole conversation all on its own once again on Arrow. So I just, especially with this week's episode, so it just kind of It's kind of interesting in all of that regard stuff. But I'm very interested to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good